If there's one thing which capitalism, socialism, and communism all have in common, is that they all kind of suck. Sure, conceptually, a lot of them sound alright, but there's always evils behind each system. And there's always people who just embody these flaws. For communism, there's Joseph Stalin. For socialism, there's Mao Zedong. And for capitalism, there's Ryo Now, even if capitalism itself isn't really that bad, as I said before, it certainly has its flaws. And to explore these flaws, rather than looking at real-world examples of capitalistic evil with companies like Boeing, JP Morgan and Bayer, or even looking at people like Jeff Bezos or Brian Thompson, I'd rather look at the evils of capitalism through the wise teachings of Bocchi Rock. The first capitalist evil which Ryo represents is the exploitation of our workers, as seen in the following clip.
ボッチはダイヤの原石だったのか。MV はボッチを水着にしよう。今のバンドは動画サイトの再生数こそ正義。再生数稼ぎには多少の犠牲も必要。それかガムテープ巻いて海の上で引かせよう。誰かお金貸して。
Ryo's practice of exploiting Bocchi's body for monetary gain is very similar to that of the idol industry of Japan, which itself is a capitalist evil incarnate. This idol industry commodifies its workers and exploits their youthful innocence and attractiveness in order to maximize material gains. The second capitalist evil, which Ryo represents, is privilege. A common critique of capitalism is the class inequalities it creates, where the distribution of wealth is skewed to those at the very top. Now, if Ryo worked for her money, she'd just be another cog in the capitalist machine, but she isn't. She doesn't work, and she receives huge amounts of money from her parents. She spends it freely on lots and lots of guitars, which both reflect capitalistic consumerism and the unfairness of equal opportunities for other musicians who aren't as fortunate as Ryo, who would work for hours, they'll struggle to pay rent, and have less money and time to spend on the passions of dreams of music, which obviously makes Ryo's success in the music industry much more likely than them, for no other reason aside from a socioeconomic background. Now obviously no privileged person or Ryo are necessarily horrible people just because of their financial situation, but it does reflect on the capitalist evil. Well, ethically anyways. However, we can look at Ryo's economic activities in a different lens. Though her massive collection of bass guitars represents another capitalist evil of market domination, it's every business's goal in a capitalist economy to exponentially grow their market share as large as possible, which I know doesn't sound evil, but once a company completely dominates a market, they can dictate the price of a good or a service. And a good, like a bass guitar, which is an asset which Ryo holds in large quantities. And this is usually supplemented by retailers, because I don't play any instruments, but one time I went to this guitar shop, and I hardly saw any bass guitars for sale, even though I might not know what a bass guitar actually looks like. So I looked at Reddit, and it seems like the lack of bass guitars in physical stores is the status quo of the music industry. So, I'd assume that Ryo owns most of the bass guitars in Shimo Kitazawa, I don't know how to say that, which creates a shortage of bass guitars, allowing for prices to be hiked by those to dominate the market. And that's Ryo. And we know she has no qualms in selling guitars because she gave away 2 guitars for 1 ticket for Enoshima. Now, let's say if Yamaha seizes their business activities, a shortage will be created, which would cause for temporary financial gain for many retailers before their profits plummet. But this wouldn't affect Ryo, as she has no rent to pay and can operate as a sole trader without a business license for sales, and she doesn't have any employees to cut or store to maintain. And that right there is market domination by a true capitalist pro. Unfortunately, her financial mindset isn't shared by Bocchi, Nijiga or Kida. However, there's one Achilles heel of this video, which comes in the cafe scene, where she's talking to Bocchi about her old band, and how they split apart due to their turn to commercialization. So while Ryo might represent some capitalist evils, she's an